Good morning, friends. Today we are going to talk about genre theory. So, what are genres? I know most of you would say that genres are categories. That's a simple way of putting it, the definition. Now, let's assume that you go to a DVD shop and you find DVDs shelved and located in a particular way. You often find that there is a massive range of choice under each section. You have the war DVD section, you have the horror, you have romantic comedy, science fiction, crime, whatnot. So, endless genres, endless categories. And what do these shelves explain to us, okay, as scholars or as students of film studies? Now, genres are created by demand. So, let us get it, let's get this thing very clear, that genres are created by demand. So, if there is a particular section in a DVD shop for horror or science fiction, that means there is a demand. If there is a section for romantic films or romances or crime, that means there is a demand for these films. So, for example, understand that how today we have the graphic novel and films based on these type of literature which are very popular. So, demand creates availability or supply. So, genre, to get back to what we are doing here. So, what is a genre? Genre is a French term for a kind, or generally it is denoted, it denotes a literary class, a literary type. So, the major classical genres are let us say epic, tragedy, lyric, comedy and satire, along with of course novel and short story. So, genres have a distinct set of rules. There is a code of shared tools, subject matter and a distinct set of rules, conventions and styles, but within the rules there must also be a sense of freedom. This is important, that within the rules a filmmaker should be able to experiment, or if you are talking about literary genre, then a writer should be able to experience a sense of freedom to experiment. Genres seek to understand film as a specific form of commodity, and at a more refined level attempts to disentangle different instances of that commodity. Now, let us talk about genres in literature. So, horror genre is a very popular genre. We usually credit American writer, the great American writer Edgar Allan Poe, who in 1820 wrote his popular Tale of Terror, and after this Wilkie Collins published The Moonstone in 1868, which can be regarded as the first true detective novel in English. In 1902, Owen Wister published The Virginians, a Western, and in 1926 Hugo Gernbach brought out Amazing Stories, the earliest examples of science fiction. So, what are we talking about? We are talking about the development, the genesis, the development, the growth of various genres. Now, it is important to understand that in genres, a number of approaches have developed that address Hollywood's generic structures, all of which are underpinned by different assumptions about the purpose of genre criticism. Richard Dyer, a film scholar, in 1973 argued that genres are pleasurable because they offer escapist fantasies into fictional world that remove the boredom of reality. He sees these worlds as utopian that offer an abundance of energy, excitement and spontaneity. Genres are constructed for a known or guaranteed audience. They use repeated storylines and stock characters, but again let me tell you, this does not mean that a filmmaker is not free to experiment, because within a genre also, there can be various things happening, various changes and various experiments happening. People also associate reuse of sets, props and actors with particular genres. Now, let me focus your attention to what John Fiske, a genre expert, says. So, I read this citation from John Fiske. A representation of a car chase only makes sense in relation to all the others we have seen. After all, we are unlikely to have experienced one in reality, and if we did, we would, according to this model, make sense of it by turning it into another text which we would also understand intertextually in terms of what we have seen so often on our screens. There is then a cultural knowledge of the concept car chase that anyone text is a prospectus for, and that it is used by the viewer to decode it and by the producer to encode it. So, what we are trying to talk about or explain here is that genres are tried and tested and provide an element of security for filmmakers as well as those who invest in cinema. And for audience, it is always a pleasure to watch things that have been tried and tested. Also, budget and financial returns are easier to predict where genres are concerned. They allow for clear product and audience differentiation and market segmentation. The film business uses genre as a mode of labeling and positioning their products. Now, according to Dudley Andrews in Concepts in Film Theory, and he is another great name associated with genre theory. So, for him, genres are specific networks of formulas which deliver a certified product to a waiting customer. So, audiences become a waiting and a willing sort of customer for particular genres. Genre ensure the production of meaning by regulating the viewer's relation to the images and narratives constructed for them, and genre construct the proper spectator for the consumption, for their own consumption. Rick Altman is another name which is associated with genre theory. He has written a seminal article, A Semantic Syntactic Approach to Film Genre, published in 1984, and he asks what is a genre, what is a film genre. He goes on to explain that genre analysis is both inclusive and exclusive. It is inclusive because it includes a long list of films that can be specifically categorized. Genres are exclusive as certain films within a genre are canonized and are discussed as exemplary texts. He also felt that genre theory has ignored the fact that generic theory and definitions were first introduced by the film industry. One has to consider how genres develop, mutate and rise and fall in popularity. Altman's two approaches to understand genres are semantic and syntactic. Semantics is the building blocks of a genre, including costume, acting, cinematography, iconography, etc. And syntax concerns the overlying structure and the deeper meaning. In Film Genre, which is a book by Rick Altman published in 1999, Altman offers 10 tendencies of literary genres, and genres have a distinct border and can be firmly identified according to Altman. Genre theorists for Altman seek to describe the already existing genres. The internal functioning of genre text is considered entirely observable and objectively analyzable. Texts with similar characteristics systematically generate similar meanings, similar uses and similar readings. Producers, readers and critics all share the same interest in genre. Altman also adds that readers' expectation and audience reaction have received little independent attention. He also raises the question of genre history and posits if genre can be objectively or scientifically studied. For Altman, genres are never neutral categories, and genre theories generally do not recognize the institutional character of their own generic practice. From there we move on to the to another category, that is subgenre. So, subgenres are categories within an overarching genre. These are defined by specific characteristics. For example, we use the term slasher films for horror films, then we also use post apocalyptic for science fiction films. Film noir is a subgenre of gangster cinema, and sport films of drama. For example, let us consider our own Chak De India, which is a sports drama, okay, and it is a subgenre of a broader category called drama. There is a conflict, there is a hero, there is a hero's journey, and it is a story of a hero's fall and rise. Okay. So, therefore, there is plenty of drama in Chak De India. Then we have a movie, we have courtroom dramas. Again, they are subgenre or subcategories of drama. Think of a movie such as A Few Good Men or 12 Angry Men, and these are courtroom dramas. There are three major thrusts of theoretical development here. First, the taxonomic view of genre, which attempts to map the boundaries between generic classes. Secondly, the view of genre as an economic strategy for organizing film production schedules, and third, the view of genre as a function of cognition, as a contract between producers and consumers, which renders film intelligible on some level. A generic analysis of cinema offers not only the possibility of describing the systematic nature of Hollywood as an industry, in which differentiation between individual films occurs only within an overarching logic of product standardization, but we have to understand that genres are no longer just Hollywood categories. In Hindi cinema, or in particularly even our regional cinema, we do depend a lot on generic categories. Think of our own recently released NH10, which is a subcategory of a slasher and horror flick. Okay, broad category is horror, but you can also call it, label it as as a slasher cinema. Okay, and of course we have family films and musicals such as Hum Aapke Hain Kaun, that cater to another particular type of audience, the so called family audience. So, genres are very well known categories in Indian cinema and of course in Hollywood cinema. We have to understand that these categories prompt consideration of different genres in terms of their collective significance or deeper meanings. In other words, exactly the same value judgment that sees Hollywood cinema as first and foremost a cinema of genre, which serves to marginalize the standard practices of Hollywood in the hands of auteur critics, provided genre critics with a critical vocabulary appropriate to the art of those practices. Moreover, it is founded on the problematic assumption to do not only with the genre it implies, but and also that genre is somehow already out there as an essential structure of text, but also to do with the activity of doing genre studies. While the former assumption rests on the ahistorical premise that genre exists in itself and that it inevitably has essential qualities that can be revealed through proper analysis, the latter assumptions tend to mask the productive role of critics and scholars in the definition of generic categories and the institutional frameworks within which such practices take place. Nevertheless, despite these problems which Altman argues have had the effect of narrowing genre theory ever since, Aristotle's model of genre analysis has by turn proved remarkably influential and durable, and this is what Altman feels, that the great Greek thinker and philosopher Aristotle, who has given us the concept of drama and its definition. So, his model of genre analysis has been particularly influential and durable. So, in the same way that Aristotle identifies the epic, comedy, tragedy and so forth as essential genres of poetry, insofar as they are seen to exist in themselves as pure categories of literature, we also have Alan Williams, who has identified the principal film genres as the narrative film, experimental avant-garde film and the documentary. For Williams, these categories as the conceptual or are the conceptual equivalent of and thus share the same sense of permanence as those described by Aristotle. On this account, the labels we ordinarily use to distinguish between films of various kinds such as thriller, horror, science fiction, comedy, romance and so on actually refer to the subgenres of the narrative film. Genres evoke the look of the characters, physical environment, significant objects. Genres identify identity, preserves a film's integrity. Okay. They allow for some expectations, certain things can happen and certain things can't. Okay. So, for example, let us assume that in a traditionally romantic and family musical drama such as Dilwale Dulhaniya Le Jayenge, we cannot suddenly expect a noish environment. So, a particular genre expects certain kinds of environment, certain kinds of characters, and there are certain things which cannot happen, just cannot occur in a particular genre. Now, let us talk about iconography and genres. Iconography is a key term in the analysis of genre. An iconographic approach to genre analysis involves the identification, description and interpretation of cinematic objects, events, figures in order to see how one type of film was marked off from another on the basis of differences in visual conventions. The Western was distinguished by setting both specific and general, the West, the frontier deserts, mountains, Monument Valley, saloons, etc., and costume, for example, the waistcoat, gun belts, boots, specificities of props, and even actors such as reliance on actors like Gary Cooper or John Wayne and later on Clint Eastwood. However, if an attention to iconography worked well for the Western and gangster film in Hollywood, it proved difficult to translate such visually specific methodology to other kinds of films. For instance, it is difficult to isolate distinct iconographic systems for crime films or thrillers and most action films with any clarity. Guns and weaponry are common to each, and unlike the Western and gangster film, there is not necessarily any historically specific criteria to regulate aspects of setting and costume. Tone is another key element in understanding genres. So, tone contributes towards establishing a genre. The way a film is lit or set up, how a camera is positioned can be an indicator of genre. For example, let us say the use of harmonica in the Western film, even guitars in the Western film, where we cannot expect the leading man to break into a very modern dance, let us say disco or a break dance or hip hop. The horror movies include prints of view shots, silences, etc., to evoke the feelings of fear. For example, let us consider again a film like NH10. So, now where does all this discussion lead to? Are we trying to establish that genres are very predictable and unimaginative depending on the same sense and same idea over and again, just to lull us into some kind of identification with the genre and comfortable the feeling of comfort? So, is that a question? Now, it is a very difficult question to answer if genres are getting too predictable. Genres try to avoid predictability if they are audiences who will decline and industries will lose money, genres have to adopt to reflect changes in social and cultural attitudes, values and expectations. So, there has to be some change. Okay. Stale genres can be revived by bringing in less predictable and more imaginative elements. Think of the gay theme introduced in a western like Brokeback Mountain, directed by Ang Lee. And what is the role of audience in genres? So, genres depend on a set of audiences. This is something that we have to recognize. The film industry generally targets a niche group of audiences. These are based on gender, sexuality, race, nationality, etc. Certain films are labeled women's films, for example, romantic comedies, musicals, love stories. On the other hand, genres such as war and gangsters are more like men's films. A romantic film such as Yash Chopra's Dil To Pagal Hai, or the Hollywood movie starring Julia Roberts, My Best Friend's Wedding, is supposed to be traditionally a light-hearted romance with a feel-good factor. Okay. Think of Karan Johar's films like Kuch Kuch Hota Hai. You know, there has to be a feel-good factor here, student of the year. So, audience expect these light-hearted romantic films to be to have certain elements which make them feel good. So, audience expects it to be in a certain way. So, likewise titles, posters, stars, images, all these factors contribute toward a particular genre and the audience's expectations of it. Film industry and producers rely on genres and generic conventions to secure finances. So, money is at the center of genres. Genres make movies easier to market because there is a core niche audience waiting to consume the film. Again, there is a scholar, Steve Neal, who in Questions of Genre suggests that there are two things that are central to the understanding of the genre: verisimilitude, that is being true to life, and the question of social and cultural function that genres perform. Now, Neal goes on to explain how some genres hold verisimilitude as highly important, whereas some genres can break away from strict adherence. Neal states that sometimes breaking away from generic traditions may bring unexpected pleasures for the audiences. Neal suggests that the future of genre studies must consider the prehistory, that is the development from other forms of media, all films regardless of quality of those films, and factors other than content such as advertising. What roles does advertising or studio policy or star images they play in making of genres? There is also a concept of genre blending. For example, the classic Hollywood film Casablanca, starring Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman. So, it is an example of of a film that lacks genre definition and slip between various categories. It is a film that crosses genres, and again we have an example like Star Wars, which is essentially a science fiction, but it also has elements of a western. Casablanca, coming back to it, can be called a war film. It is set during the war period. It is a romance with songs, it is an adventure thriller film, and it is also a buddy film. So, it is all things to all viewers. Again, a very contemporary film like The Matrix, it can be labeled as a science fiction. It is also a Hong Kong action flick. It can be seen as a neo-noir, and scholars have also tried to do a philosophical reading of the Matrix film. So, it is a pop philosophical movie also. So, it is a blend of several genres. Tarantino's Jackie Brown again nods at Hong Kong action films from the 70s and 80s, and also at blaxploitation films of the 70s. It is a subgenre with urban blacks as protagonists. It is also a heist film, and it is also a nod at girl gang flicks such and also the 60s western. Now, let us consider something like genre bending, a movie that completely throws out all the rules out of the window, and I would like to talk about a Hollywood film called The Hours. So, it is The Hours is a novel by Michael Cunningham. It is a perfect example of how difficult it could be to adapt a work of literary fiction. Here Cunningham reimagines Virginia Woolf's novel Mrs. Dalloway. Cunningham integrates the stories of 3 women in 3 different locations and time periods, all linked through Woolf's book. Now, Mrs. Dalloway is a story of a single day in the life of an upper class English woman as she plans a party for her husband Richard. All her life, her memories to her acceptance of death is encapsulated in a single day, and Michael Cunningham wrote a present day version of Mrs. Dalloway in his The Hours. Now, taking the title of his book The Hours from Virginia Woolf's original working title, and it extends the course of a single day to 3 women. Woolf herself, who faces a crisis with her husband Richard over a day during the writings of Mrs. Dalloway. This is set in 1923. Then a housewife named Laura Brown in 1951 Los Angeles, whose life is altered forever one day as she reads Mrs. Dalloway, and a book editor named Clarissa Worm in 2001, a contemporary version of the Mrs. Dalloway character. So, The Hours is a literary novel based on another literary novel and glorifies reading and the power of literature. It is a genre bending work. The screenplay was written by David Hare, who himself is an acclaimed dramatist. Now, genre theory creates heated debates as it continues to puzzle and excite scholars and audiences alike. Regardless of the theoretical debates and developments in the debates, audiences enjoy genre films as they provide familiarity. Apart from various genres, we should also consider the various distinctions that are made where cinema is concerned. For example, we have feature films and short films. We also have categories such as documentaries, where non-fictional motion pictures recreate some aspect of reality, and then we also have biographical cinema, and then also we can have great documentaries based on some biographies or well-known events and festivals, or an expose involving interviews with people. So, this is what I had to tell you about genres, and here I would like to draw your attention to the bibliography. So, Rick Altman's film genre, Keith Grant Barry's film genre From Iconography to Ideology, and Barry Langford's film genre Hollywood and Beyond. So, thank you very much, and we will meet for our next class.